Thanks everybody for being here. I'm with Electric Metals. We've got the highest grade manganese deposit in North America by a factor of 2. And our strategy is to be producing high value, high purity manganese products for what I'll call the electrification. And primarily focused initially on the electric vehicle battery sector, energy storage sector. What I'll do is, I'm not sure how many of you understand manganese or understand the manganese markets, but we'll walk through a little bit of that first, and then we'll go into what the company is doing. First of all, manganese is the 4th most used metal on the planet. Primarily, it goes into making steel. Where we're really focused on is the battery sector. And there's two pieces to the battery sector. One is the lithium-ion batteries, which goes into the EV battery sector, battery energy storage sector. And then the other batteries, I call them the flashlight batteries. That's high purity electrolytic manganese dioxide versus the high purity manganese sulphate monohydrate that goes into the lithium-ion batteries. We're really focused on the high manganese content batteries, NMCs, to give you an idea of the differences between, I'll call it China and the United States. In China, about 70% of that market is a lithium iron phosphate battery. That's because they don't have it's less expensive, but it doesn't have the range that an NMC battery will have. And that's really the driver in the North American market is range anxiety. People want to go 300, 400 miles on a charge. They don't want to wait very long, and you need manganese in order to do that. From a lithium iron phosphate battery perspective, they're now starting to put manganese in them, and what that does is it increases the energy density, increases the voltage, and it gives it a wider range of operating parameters. From a manganese demand, the so-called experts are forecasting about 800,000 tons of HPMSM demand by 2030. The electrification of everything is, that ship has sailed and it's not coming back. And so even though Mr. Trump has gotten rid of the EV mandates, that's really not going to substantially slow down the uptake of electrification. And it's not just automobiles that we're talking about. It's the electrification of airplanes, helicopters, buses, trucks, kind of pretty much you name it, it's going to get electrified, and that's going to increase the demand. From a perspective of a reliance, currently there's no manganese production at all in the United States. 100% of it's imported. And so when you look at the supply chain, it usually comes from West and South Africa, goes over to China, it gets processed, and then it gets sent back to the United States. About 96% of the high purity manganese sulphate monohydrate production comes out of China. About 98% of the electrolytic manganese metal comes out of China. There's only one metal plant outside of China that's here in South Africa. There's currently only 2 HPMSM plants outside of China. One's in Belgium, one's in Japan. National security is a big one. I think Adam Smith had it right in that a product should be made wherever it's the cheapest and most efficient place to make it, which theoretically would be China. But once you throw in the national security aspects of that, Adam Smith goes out the window. And so from a national security perspective, particularly with Mr. Trump in office now and his anti-China sentiment, being able to produce 100% domestically sourced manganese and high purity manganese sulphate monohydrate is what I call a dream scenario for the electric vehicle battery manufacturers. When we look at where the North American battery initiatives are going, you can see Emily is pretty much strategically located there in the middle where the red dot is. Over on the east in Ohio is within about a day's drive from 70% of the electric vehicle battery and plants. And so from a strategic location perspective, Emily's in a perfect place. What we really need is to be next to a sulfuric acid plant. And those sulfuric acid plants would be located maybe in Ohio, Kentucky, Louisiana, or Texas. And then what we can do is identify what those locations might be, and then use each government to give us the best tax incentives as to where we actually decide to put our plant. Then we'll jump into the company here. Again, we're going to be producing high purity products. What really makes us different is the fact that we've got the highest grade manganese deposit in North America by a factor of 2. The current average grade is about 18.5%, but we've got drill hole intercepts of plus 40%. So it's a very high grade manganese ore. And that 18.5% hasn't even been upgraded yet. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is figuring out the optimal particle size to separate the iron from the manganese. Great location in Minnesota. We're about 2 hours north from Minneapolis, about 2 hours west of Duluth. We can get the elephant in the room on the table, and that's permitting in Minnesota. And the big issue there are the sulfide deposits. And Minnesota is the land of 14,000 plus lakes, and they don't want the sulfide deposits to be producing sulfuric acid. We are in the Cuyuna iron range. We're a manganiferous iron deposit, so when we go through the permitting system, we'll go through the iron side of it. And the main mineral is manganite, which is a manganese oxide hydroxide, so we've got no sulfides. So it's although we expect some stones being thrown at us, it wouldn't be anything like the sulfide guys are dealing with. Of course, we talked about the industry dynamics here. And again, we're initially looking at producing high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate for the lithium-ion battery sector. But the M in the LFP is a manganese tetroxide, so we'll also be looking at producing that, as well as electrolytic manganese dioxide for what I call the flashlight battery sector. We talked about the project location there in Minnesota, pretty much central Minnesota. About 40 miles north and 40 miles south of the project, we've got access to rail. We can go out to Duluth to get on the Great Lakes. And we could potentially send it down to the Minnesota-St. Paul area and put it on a barge and down the Mississippi. The world was a different place 1.8 billion years ago. The chemistry of the solution, I'll call it, was filled with iron and manganese, and when the great oxygenation event happened, that's what allowed the manganese and the iron to be dissolved out. One of the things of importance is it was drilled by Pickens Mather in the 1940s, and then U.S. Steel put together an open pit mine plan back in 1959. So we say that we got the Pirates map for where the main aspect of the deposit is. We're going to be drilling in that main core of the deposit. So we pretty much have a great idea of where it is. And here's a picture of the deposit as we speak. The red dots are the drill program that we put together in 2023. And that's the area of the historic U.S. Steel. We're going to be picking up that land parcel in the middle of the staple-shaped area. And so we've only got maybe half of the deposit really drilled out. If you go up to the very north on the west side of that slide, those intercepts up there are 40+% manganese. So we feel that we've got substantial upside potential. Here's our 43101 resource. Again, about just over 11 million tons of 18.5% manganese. Our target mine production is 500,000 tons a year, which allows us to theoretically produce about 250,000 tons of high purity manganese sulfate monohydrate, which we won't be doing. We'll probably start out at 100,000 tons a year and see where the market is, and then look to expand into that. Also, from a permitting perspective, the congressional district where Emily is located is held by a Republican, and he just happens to be the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources. With the change in administration, the Republicans in office in Minnesota are really looking to get something done. And so we expect that we'll be getting some good support from them. We've submitted a white paper to the Department of Defense for some funding. We'll see where we are in the Trump administration and how they're progressing along. But we'll be working with those congressmen. We also have a congressman in Massachusetts. He's a Democrat, and he is on the House Select Committee on the strategic competition between the US and China, and just happens to be the college roommate of one of our directors. So we'll also be tapping him in for a letter of support for our DoD project. We completed our metallurgical test work with Cometco. Cometco had also done previous test work, so we know that we can produce high purity electrolytic manganese dioxide, high purity electrolytic manganese metal, manganese carbonate, and of course high purity manganese sulphate monohydrate. We are in the process of completing our PEA, which we expect to have done in Q2, to get at least the preliminary economic analysis of the project done. We don't need to do any more drilling at this stage. We don't need to do any more metallurgical test work at this stage. From a project development perspective, as I said, we're looking to do a PEA on the mine. We also plan to kick off a PEA on the plant to get an idea of the economics of building that plant. A location study, which we're pretty much underway on and got a long way down the track. We've identified 4 potential sulfuric plants that are very interested in co-locating with us. And that's probably the most important piece. We need low-cost electricity. We need sulfuric acid and sulfur dioxide. As soon as we complete these PEAs, we'll be pushing down the track to accelerate the feasibility study. The big issue there is how quickly we might be able to get some Department of Defense funding to really accelerate that process. We'll be developing the mine and the plant in parallel, so that we're going to make sure that if the mine gets delayed a little bit, we've got the plant up and running, and of course we know where we can get some manganese if we needed to fill that plant in. So the near-term catalysts, probably the big one is this PEA coming out in Q2. We're talking with about half a dozen or so of the big auto manufacturers right now. We've got NDAs out with them. And then just a corporate snapshot at the moment. Relatively tight capital structure for a junior at this point, just 150 million shares outstanding. Woefully short on the market capitalization at this point. But we're hoping that PEA helps facilitate moving that share price up. And again, the key takeaways: we got the highest grade manganese deposit in North America. There are no other manganese mines in production at all in the United States. There's only one other one that has the possibility of getting into production, and that's a few years out. The supply-demand fundamentals for high purity manganese sulfate in the United States, the anti-China stance of the Trump administration should help us accelerate what we're doing.